So welcome to week 3 of the devotional. Today we're going to build on some of the initial basics that we established in week 2. In week 2 we talked about talking to God in our prayer life as if He's sitting in the room with us and not complicating it with many words or trying to impress God, but just simply having a conversation with Him as if He's sitting right next to us and is, an old friend. And this week we want to talk a little bit about, because week 1 was more about how you should pray. And this week I want to talk a little bit about what you should be praying for. And when I first think about that, even in my own personal life, throughout my childhood and getting older, what are the things that I used to pray for? And starting out, a lot of times it was about trouble. Trouble that I was in, trouble that I was headed towards, like, Lord, I mean, please get me out of this. There's nothing I won't do. Please, 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 please. I imagine heaven is most bombarded when trouble is highest in people's lives. That's when everyone turns to God. When there's that knock on the door or that phone call, and you know that there's something coming down the pipeline that you're going to have to deal with, then everyone wants to get their religion. Everyone wants to get saved in that moment. Lord, please come help me. Remember, we're cool like that. Oh, okay. But let's talk a little bit about what's close to the heart of God when it comes to your prayer life and what you should be praying for. So again, we're going to go back to Matthew 6, which is the text that we've been working from when talking about prayer, because that's where Christ talks about it. And we started with verses 5 through 15, and now we're reducing that down to verses 9 through 15, as we've already dealt with verses 5 through 8 up until this point. So if you need to review those, just go back and look at the previous devotionals. So verse 9 says, "This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." So what I want to focus on really here is the first 2 verses of that, verses 9 and verses 10. What are the first 2 things that Jesus does in His own prayer life? The very first thing He does is says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." The first thing He does is honor God. He reminds Himself of who God is, that God is King of His life, and that He's in a position of honor. Before we ask God for anything, a lot of times we just say, "Lord, please let me do well in this test," or "Please help me get out of this." Forget all of that. The first thing that should come out of your mouth is, "Lord, you are so great. Lord, you are so good. You're so merciful. I'm so thankful that you are even considerate of me. Lord, I thank you for being my King." This is a prime example of one of the other principles that we talked about, our 3 basics: read the Word, make prayer a habit, learn to worship in Thanksgiving. That's a key example of that, learn to worship in Thanksgiving. Before asking for anything, just reminding yourself of who God is. That He is great, that He is worthy of your prayer, worthy of your commitment and your loyalty. He is King of your life. That's the very first thing that Jesus does before He asks for anything. The second thing He does in verse 10 is He says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." Jesus doesn't ask for anything selfish here. He asks that the will of God would be done, not only in a very specific way in His own life, but more so everywhere. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is a great example of us saying to ourselves, "Lord, I pray that your will be done in my life. I pray that your will be done in the life of my parents, in the life of the elected officials, the government, the church, whatever organization or body, in my job, in my company. Lord, I pray that your will would be done." That's a prayer that will never return void when you're asking for God's will to be done in your life. I think that's so important for us to look at those very first 2 things that Jesus did. He first gave honor to God, reminding Himself of who God is and His worth. And secondly, He asked that God's will would be done in His life and the life of all of those around Him. We need to remind ourselves that God is not a genie, that we need to rub on the lamp and pick up the Bible and pray to Him when we need Him to get us out of trouble. But He is King of our lives. And remind ourselves of that in our prayer life, because if your prayer life priority is about you, you're doing something wrong. Your first priority in your prayer life should be about God. It should be about His will and that He is Lord of your life. So we will leave it there for now, and I look forward to seeing you guys in week 4 where we dive deeper into the basics of prayer.